Okay, we're going to be doing a bunch of reading in this video, so bear with me. Today's conversation is going over a defenseman whose name has circulated in the NHL for the better part of a decade and a half, pretty much. He's been a pretty good player, especially as a shutdown, defensively minded guy. He's had a pretty good reputation the past few years, and he's definitely got my respect because of it, and he probably has yours as well. This is a player, though, however, that is no longer in the NHL. He became a free agent this offseason and recently signed with HV71 in the Swedish league. Let's talk today about former Leaf, Blue Jacket, Rangers, Lightning, Coyotes, Panthers, and Bruins defenseman Anton Stralman. And the reason Stralman is in the news today is because you had yourselves this interview he did with ExpressN.se, which highlights the disappointment he feels with the NHL, and he talks about the difficult times he had spent with the Boston Bruins. Now, this article was also posted onto the hockey subreddit, and you could see the title that the post has. Anton Stralman speaks about his time in the NHL and feeling betrayed by the Boston Bruins. Now, betrayed is a really strong word, and that's why I wanted to go out there and make this video, because when I saw that pop up in my timeline, I was like, oh, we need to read that. So, the situation with Stralman goes as follows. The guy's 36 years old, 6 feet, 194 right-handed defenseman. We all kind of recognize that this was one of the better shutdown defensemen in the entire NHL the past few years, and he really made a living with the Blue Jackets, the Rangers, especially on the Lightning, providing that rock presence. Now, with Tampa Bay, he actually did start producing points as well. 39 points, 82 games played in 2014-15. Unfortunately, though, the guy did not have himself the Stanley Cup pedigree with Tampa Bay. It's kind of unlucky, but the guy did play for the Rangers when they went to the finals in 2014, but he lost. In 2015 against the Blackhawks, he played, but he lost again. And the season after they went to the third round, he only played 6 games. He broke his leg in a thing with Anders Lee, I think it was. The Lightning did not make the finals again until 2019-20 in the bubble year when they played off against Dallas, but unfortunately, that was the first season wherein Anton Stralman was not a part of the team. He was on Florida at that point. He then plays in Arizona in 21-22, gets a few points, and then, as a free agent, he signs a 1-year deal with the Boston Bruins, and then this happens. 2022-2023 sees Anton Stralman play 8 games with the regular Bruins, 0 points, and 17 games with the baby Bruins, getting 4 points. This is a pretty steep drop-off when it comes to points and games played in general. So, why in the world did Anton Stralman go out there and sign a contract with the Boston Bruins in the first place? Well, let's go over onto the article on ExpressN.se and talk about what it was that Stralman was feeling, how he feels about the situation now, 1 year removed, and just what's going on with him and his NHL career. The article is linked in the description, but I had to go out there and, translate it. Anton Stralman's disappointment with the NHL, he talks about the difficult times with the Boston Bruins. The article opens up by asking Stralman how he'll look back on his years in the NHL. He says it depends how he looks at it, but you could say it's been a long and fun journey. The article says that most people probably think about Stralman with the Rangers and the Lightning and how he was a companion to Lundqvist and Hedman. This is where that saying that Anton Stralman doesn't get the award as the league's best defenseman, but his colleagues do for sure, became true. And that was sort of an idea that was floating around towards the late 2010s, that Victor Hedman was so gosh darn good, but part of the reason he could even be good was because the guy he was playing with, Anton Stralman, was able to keep up. And Anton Stralman was super underrated because being able to play with Hedman and make Hedman better is somewhat of a skill on its own. So Stralman definitely did have a big part in forming Victor Hedman into what he is today, just by allowing Hedman to grow. Then you have yourselves conversations about family life, a lot of other stuff. Again, the link is in the description if you want to go ahead and read this, but I wanted to skip to the middle to ending parts of this article, because if you read what the NHL veteran talks about when it comes to lies, this is where things get really interesting. Big sporting moments with a couple of Stanley Cup finals cannot erase what his family had to give up with Anton Stralman's absence. Having 4 children and starting a family at the same time, Stralman says, it's not an easy task. It really isn't. It's been an absolutely incredible journey how they pulled the heaviest load. Balancing it with an NHL becomes an enemy in the family, even though it allows us to experience cool things. It's a difficult dynamic and you can talk about it for years and years. Stralman says this: "It's not a dream employer in terms of how you are treated and all that. The NHL is a cutthroat business. It's well documented about how it's done, and is. It's tough to be in that business if you compare it to normal working conditions here at home in any sector. It's special. It's not entirely easy," he says. There's a lot of lying in the NHL, a lot of going behind one's back, saying one thing, doing another. Tough conditions. It's tough at the top. That's how it works. Then there are those who are abused. That's a completely different matter. Now, I'm talking about the jargon itself and how to be treated in teams and the conduct. You are sent up and down and told one thing and something else is done. Someone gets cut here and there. It's a tough league to manage when you don't know how it works. There are few who say when you drive over that it doesn't work like anywhere else, not least in Europe. This will be top of the line, but people don't care how they treat you. Then you have yourselves more comments made by Stralman about the Boston Bruins. This is the analysis done on his tenure there. First, Anton Stralman was given 8 games in the NHL, then almost 2 months without playing at all. He was then sent down to the AHL, which he had not played in since 08-09. Stralman says this: "The Boston Bruins probably thought at the beginning that I became a lone player for them for a few months. Then they got rid of me in the AHL. You feel betrayed. That was not what we were talking about. It's just an example of how it can be. It was not a fun year for me in any way personally, but we know what it's like when NHL professionals complain. I understand how it can sound, but it's an example of how it can work over there," he says and continues. "They say one thing and sell one thing, then it doesn't matter for a couple of months. It was heavy. Then when his contract expired, the choice to move back to Sweden was basically already made. It's clear that there are a lot of emotions, partially the last year in Boston, but also everything that has been fantastic. There's a lot to reflect on, but in the end, I think I'll be extremely grateful for the years in the NHL." Now, this is where things get really interesting because the way Stralman is phrasing it, he's essentially saying that he was told one thing and was forced into doing another. How the Boston Bruins maybe said to him that they would use him more, but they didn't end up doing so. Let's go back over onto the subreddit, the rhockey sub, because there's a really interesting conversation in the comments of this post that goes out there with the opposing perspective. SweatyAD440 says, "I don't know what Stralman expected signing with us, to be honest. Maybe Sweeney promised him a spot in the NHL roster, and if so, I could see why he'd be mad, but we already had 8 NHL defensemen when he signed with us, so I can't imagine that's the case. Also, unless my Google Translate is on the fritz, he was talking about the NHL being cutthroat in general when he said that lots of lies line." A reply here says he talks both in general about the NHL being cutthroat and also talks about his situation with the Bruins. He says he made it clear to teams that he wasn't interested in being a lone player, as he puts it. He wanted a place on the regular roster, and he ended up not getting it. Further replies say, "That sounds to me like he wanted a guaranteed roster spot, and what he got was a chance at one, which he didn't get because he was outplayed by other competition." More like he said he wasn't interested in being a 7th or 8th D. The Bruins told him, "We plan for you to be higher up in the hierarchy, so sign with us." And then he got buried in the NHL anyway after 8 games. This happened because he was outplayed by Zaboro, Clifton, Forbert, and even Mike Riley. That isn't a collection of world beaters, he just couldn't hack it. This Bruins commenter says that if Sweeney directly said that he was a roster lock, that's pretty bad. But it would have been management malpractice to keep him on the roster over better players. I have no doubt that lots of teams, the Bruins included, promise guys who probably aren't going to get regular minutes a spot in the depth chart with a possibility to climb it, without directly stating that they can fall down the depth chart if they don't play well enough. But if you get beat out by Jacob Zaboral, that's not on management unless they directly say the words guaranteed playing time no matter what. It sucks for him and players like him, and I'm sure I'd be just as pissed off if I was in his shoes, but there are only so many NHL roster spots. And when you think about Stralman's previous year, he played in Arizona, 23 points, 74 games played, minus 16, which honestly isn't that bad considering he was on the Coyotes. This is probably a guy whom I could say still has NHL potential. Like, 1 year of being tossed around between the NHL and the AHL is not great, and I get it, he is 36, but Stralman has been one of the more solid and just presently minded shutdown guys in the NHL the past few years, so this is a guy who I really do think is still good enough to play. It's just, if his experience with Boston was so tantalizing and traumatizing that he doesn't even feel like he wants to stay in North America anymore, then okay, that's his prerogative. I mean, the word he used was betrayed, which is a pretty harsh word, but if he was guaranteed ice time only to not get it and be sent down to the AHL after 2 months of not playing, then I can understand why he's frustrated. But either way, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below about Anton Stralman and the way he was betrayed by the Boston Bruins. The article and Reddit thread are going to be linked in the description if you want to go ahead and read those yourself. But I hope you enjoyed this video. And bye.